Christine, aka Crafty Potential, and I'm on the design team for Arden Creative Studios, and today I thought we could play around with a fun technique using the gorgeous Lots of Leaves stencil from the brand new Laurel Grove Collection from Katie Pertiet. I know Katie is a big fan of watercolouring a stencil, flipping it over and creating an impression from the stencil, but I don't think she's shown this technique. I might be wrong, but anyway, you'll get to see a different technique using watercolours and a stencil in this video. So, compared to a lot of my tutorial videos that I've done for Arden, this one's going to be a relatively quick one, hopefully, because I thought this is just a lovely, really simple technique that you can run with. You can just do it with whatever paints you have, whatever colour scheme you want to do it with, and whatever stamps from Arden that you have in your stash as well. You can even do this with other stencils in the collection too. But for today's video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use a couple of little bits of washi tape just to tape my stencil down. I have got one background already dried, and for that one I did actually use a smaller piece of card. So if you want to work with a larger stencil but a smaller piece of card, you can just tape it from behind. So you'll tape the smaller piece of card to the back of your stencil and work that way as well. But I just thought for demonstration purposes it's quite nice to do it on a larger piece of card. You're also going to want a watercolour palette, whatever watercolours you have in your stash. I'm using this one that's got a lovely mixture of some metallics and some different tones in here as well of greens, because I'm going to go for green and a little bit of browny red kind of colour with a bit of gold and some metallic green in there as well. But you can go for whatever colours you want. And then you're also going to want a nice flat paintbrush. It can be a bigger one than this as well, but just a lovely flat paintbrush for the main technique. And then we might also want a small little round paintbrush for adding some fine splatter as well. So that's what you're going to need for this technique, plus some water off to the side as well. But as well as water, you are going to want a piece of kitchen roll, because we want to work with just a slightly damp brush when we're doing this technique. We don't want the watercolour to seep underneath our stencil. You know, like when you use spray inks and you add too much and it goes underneath the stencil. We want to try and avoid that. It's probably going to happen in a couple of areas just because of like heavy-handedness and forgetting to dab your brush off and stuff like that. But we want to try and avoid it as much as possible. And when you are using a slightly more drier brush, you're actually going to see more of the brush strokes in it as well, which is a nice effect too. So I like to go in this sort of a direction. So when you're working with something with a stencil that kind of has pieces that could move, they are actually nicely joined on this one, but where there are pieces that could move, you don't really want to go in the direction that they could move around in. You want to go in a direction where all of the pieces are secure. So for this particular stencil, I find going in this direction, so using the stencil in a portrait manner and going up and down it, works really nicely. So first of all, we want to start off with just getting some base green on here. So I'm just going to wet my brush. I've got some green still in my palette here. So I'm just going to reactivate that. And then I'm going to dab some of it off on my kitchen roll. And then we're literally just going to go backwards and forwards, flicking our brush in that linear motion up and down the card. And if I zoom you in a little bit whilst we're doing this, you can kind of see we're giving a stripy brushstroke effect through the stencil. You will have to keep angling your paintbrush as you're doing this, because otherwise you're not going to get right up to the edge of the stencil and get all of the detail in there. But you'll kind of get a feel for this as you're doing it yourself. So I've loaded up with some more green and dabbing some of that off, and I'm going to do exactly the same over here. I won't do the whole stencil, I'll just do sort of part of it for you, because I have got one that is dry ready, so I can show you the second stage of adding some stamping through the stencil as well. But we've got a little bit of green on there now. Then, if I zoom you out a little bit again, I'm going to go in with a darker green and just get a little bit of that. It's quite nice to use a lot of varying tones just to make it look even more sort of impressive of how on earth did you create something like that. So we've got a little bit of a darker green, dab some off on your kitchen roll and do the exact same thing. We're just going up and down in this linear motion, flicking. I'm flicking like this when I'm going, so we're flicking our paintbrush across our stencil, and we can just maybe get a bit more water, activate a bit more colour, Okay, take a little bit of the moisture off. Obviously the wetter your brush is, the more colour you're going to put down at the same time, but then you're more likely to get bleeding under the stencil. It's not the end of the world, it actually looks quite nice as part of the technique, but you just don't want it to be everywhere because it will just become a blobby kind of pattern then. But so the wetter your brush is, the more colour you're going to put down, the more possibility of bleeding under the stencil, but the drier your brush, the more brush strokey effect you're going to get. So now we've got a couple of different green tones. I've also got a pearlescent-y, metallic-y kind of green in this palette, so I'm just going to activate some of that. It's quite a deep green, this one, but we'll just activate a little bit of this just to add some metallic into there. Dry off the brush a little bit again, and then brush this over. Dry it off a little bit, and brush a little bit of the colour over, just to add some difference. You're not going to see all of the different colours in all of the different areas, and you can actually already see I've gone too heavy-handed here because there's some that's bled underneath the stencil. So it is kind of like trial and error. And you can also, if I just show you with this one, with having a little bit left on my brush, you can see that really stripy brush stroke effect that you can get when you have less on your brush. So now we've got all of those greens in, I want to bring in some like reddy, autumny kind of colours. So I've actually got in this palette a lovely bright red over here, and I'm going to mix it with a bit of brown anyway. The green is going to mix with the red and turn brown anyway because of the their opposite colours on the colour wheel, but it's quite nice to just make that red a little bit more deeper and richer with a brown tone to begin with anyway. So we've got some of that on our brush, dab a little bit off, and then, being a little bit lighter handed this time, we're just going to add in a few areas of this reddy browny kind of tone. And you can obviously do whatever colours you want. If you really like the red, you can add a bit more red in. If you also want to just bring in some of the brown, we can water down a little bit more of this brown tone as well. Dab some of that off on the brush and actually add some proper brown into here too, just to give it that autumnal kind of feel. You can go ahead and add orange and everything in here as well, or you can go with more fantasy kind of colours of blues and purples and things for your leaves, whatever you want to do. And then for a final little addition of some metallic, I've got a beautiful gold in this palette as well. So I'm just going to activate some of that and then dab off some of the excess and add a bit of this into here as well. If you do find that you've gone a bit too heavy-handed with all of the different colours and it's a little bit wet and everything's sort of blending together, you can always just wait a few moments for it to dry, and then you can add your metallic on top afterwards so that it's going to stay in more of those little brush strokey lines as well. So, you know, you can sort of play around with it as you're working for the technique. And then once you've gotten all of that colour in there, we're going to bring in our fine paintbrush, and I think I'm going to go a bit of brown splatter on this one. The previous one I did green and gold splatter, but I think this maybe needs a bit more contrast. So let's add some fine brown splatters into here. And I think I will add a little bit of gold splatter too, just because metallic splatter is always gorgeous. So a bit of metallic in here as well. Okay, now at this point, with the original background that I created, I let this dry with the stencil on there, but I need to use the stencil to finish off the other background with you, so I'm actually going to remove the stencil, but I wouldn't normally. I would normally leave this to completely dry with the stencil in place, so if anything has kind of seeped under the stencil, you're less likely to disturb it a little bit, because there's a few puddles underneath here. We might disturb it a bit as we take the stencil off, but if you leave the stencil on there to dry, it'll sort of stay in position a little bit more. But let's just remove our little pieces of washi tape that we were using to hold it into position and reveal our watercolouring through a stencil. You can really see there are a few blobby areas on this one, and to be honest, this one doesn't look as good as I was hoping it would, but I have got my other version dried to show you as well. So this one, because I was working on a smaller piece of card, I was much more focused of where I was actually putting the paint on here and everything. You can see it coming together. This just went a little bit more blobby in the centre, but you can see the gorgeous effect that you can get watercolouring through a stencil, and using that sort of almost dry brushing technique, you're getting that stripy effect in your leaves as well, and we can also see the splatter coming through too. So I'm just going to move this out of the way and clean off my stencil, and then we'll come back to add some stamping through our stencil as well. Okay, so I've got my dried background and I've got my clean stencil. What we want to do now is put the stencil back over where our watercolouring was before, and I am going to use a couple of little pieces of washi tape to hold this into place from the back, because I'm working on a smaller piece of card here. If you're still working on a larger piece of card, then you can easily just tape the stencil onto the card to hold it into position. But if you are working on a smaller piece like I am here, it's really easy to line the stencil back up where you want it, and then flip it over and add your little pieces of tape, catching onto parts of the stencil and onto your cardstock as well. I might do one more piece on this side, just to hold that nicely into position. I'm also going to put a piece of scrap paper on my desk, just so any overstamping will go onto the paper rather than onto my mat, and that has moved whilst I was taping that into position. So I'm just going to move that back over and line it up again, and then I can press from the top to secure the tape and flip it over and press firmly again on the other side. So we've got that back in position now, and if you had just been creating one card and you'd left it to dry, your stencil would still be in the right position. But because I did another one to show you the process and had one already dried, I had to put it back into place. So now we've done that, I want to bring in some of the stamps from this beautiful Laurel Grove collection. So we've got Grove Notes and letterbox postmarks, and I think we're going to use a mixture. I was initially thinking of mostly using the ledger, but then I thought some of these florals are nice and small and they would show through the openings in this stencil. So we might actually go with these florals first. So I think this one in particular is going to look lovely. So let's just mount that on an acrylic block. That will just fit on there. And then I've got a dark brown pigment ink that I'm going to use. This one is called Fallen Leaves. I think this brown will go quite nicely. Although I do have a more reddy brown as well that's called Pine Cone. We might use a mixture of the two browns just to give a little bit of difference with our texture design on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick one of our ink pads, ink up part of our stamp. I'm going to go with those beautiful heads of this flower, and then we're going to stamp through our stencil. So you want to place it in a place where you're going to get a nice part of the stamp on one of your designs, and you are going to have to press quite firmly to try and get down onto the card, otherwise you know, you've got the thickness of the stencil in the way, so you do need to press relatively firmly to kind of get the image onto the cardstock below. But you can just play around with adding these beautiful flowers in different areas. So we can just, they look gorgeous like that. I think a mixture of this flower and some of that script from the other stamp set is going to look absolutely beautiful, just to give this a different look. So you've got a little bit in that one as well. Where you have used metallic watercolours, you are going to get a different effect of the ink. It's going to sort of look more metallic-y because it's going on top of something metallic. So bear that in mind as well. And we're just going to add another bit up there, I think. This stamp is absolutely beautiful. Maybe a little bit up here. Another bit down here. And then I think maybe switch to something else. Do we use another one of these beautiful florals? Maybe this one would look nice too. Okay, let's try this one as well. Let's switch to the other ink pad as well. So that was Fallen Leaves, which is a slightly more cooler toned brown, and let's move on to Pine Cone, which is a much warmer brown tone, which will go with those reddy browns that we were sort of bringing into the background. And we can ink up these beautiful flowers. Oh yeah, that looks really nice. Lovely fine detail on those. Maybe another one here. We'll use the side view. Another main view over here. Another side view up there. Maybe one more somewhere. Maybe another full flower at the top here. I think that'll look nice. If I do it this way round, I'm not going to double stamp an image there. Okay, so we've got some beautiful florals in there now. Now let's bring in a bit of the script too. Do we want the script to be less obvious? I think maybe we do. So let's bring in a Distress Oxide for stamping the script in. I think Rustic Wilderness might look quite nice, a sort of green on green tone. So let's pick out the gorgeous bit of ledgery script from the letterbox postmark set. Well, actually we could just use the smaller piece, to be honest. Let's use the smaller piece so we can be more controlled with where we place it. So I don't need as big a block as I got out. So just a little block. And then we'll go with Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide. So if we ink that up nicely, we can add that across some of our gorgeous leaves. Yeah, I think that's going to just be the perfect little addition. So just add it in a couple of different areas, just to kind of link everything together and add the same sort of patterns across more of the background as well. Really lovely, this one. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more on this side. Okay, so now comes the time where we reveal what we have done and see if we think it looks good. So obviously I haven't done a full complete card of this to see what it looks like, but I'm hoping that this is going to look really lovely, and we're just going to have a little bit of the stamping where the stencil pattern is. So let's see. Oh yeah, I think that gives a really lovely effect. Look at those lovely little bits of stamping within those stenciled leaves. Really gorgeous. Really beautiful. I am very tempted to doodle on this as well. I feel like adding your own scribbly doodled borders around the leaves would look absolutely beautiful. However, I know a lot of people probably aren't fans of doing something like that, so I might actually just leave it. But normally I would be very, very tempted to just doodle on this to add some extra designs to it. Or if you have the other stamp set from the collection, they're not exactly the same, but you could bring in some of the outlines from this actually. I think I'm going to do that. So this, it's not the same, but it's similar. It's a similar kind of leaf, this one in particular, because it's got pointy ends to it, like the stencil design has. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick a different colour of Distress Oxide, and I'm going to bring this one into it. So we're not aiming to kind of line things up here. I just want to add a little bit of outline detail into the background. Maybe even one of these colours would work. I think the Pine Cone actually. Okay, we're going to go with Pine Cone ink. We're going to ink up that beautiful leafy design, and we're just going to go for it. I like that. I think it just adds something extra to the background. Okay, do another one over here. Yeah, that was just what it needed. This one will kind of almost look like it's lining up with this one. It's a, you know, in a similar kind of direction. And then one big one coming in from the top, I think, perhaps. Coming down across there. Yeah, I like that. I think that just adds an extra arty element to this, so if you're not a fan of doodling yourself, these stamps kind of give you that doodled kind of feel, which is really nice. And we've still got that beautiful stenciling in the background too. Okay, so I think this card is almost done, but we do need a sentiment for it. So let's go back to this stamp set, which is the Grove Notes. And let's pick one of our sentiments. We've got, tomorrow is a new day. It's time to pause and oh my heart. I like tomorrow is a new day, actually. I think that's going to look really nice. And when I'm cutting my cardstock down to size for making my quarter size sort of backgrounds, I always have strips of card left over, and I often like to just place them across the card and stamp the sentiment on, and just that plain sort of strip going across just kind of breaks up the design and finishes it nicely. But actually I don't know if it's going to work that well on this one. I don't want it to cover up that much. So I'm going to do it differently. I was going to tell you how I normally do that, but I think I will go for a slightly larger piece of card and then trim this out into a rectangle. So what colour ink? I think I'm going to go for the Fallen Leaves for the sentiment. We could go with black, but there's no other black on the card and we've been using the lovely browns, so we will go with brown. Tomorrow is a new day. Really lovely sentiment, that. And I think what we're going to do is take a long bladed pair of scissors and snip it into a wonky rectangle. This is one of my favourite things to do for adding sentiments onto cards. So I think just like this. And then I think also matting it onto a piece of dark brown cardstock as well is going to work really nicely. So let's just stick this onto some dark brown card. And then we'll do exactly the same thing, trimming around it with our long bladed pair of scissors. And then we can decide where do we want it on our project. I do quite like it down in that corner. Yeah, I do think that is going to be a good position to put it. So that's where we're going to have it. And I think a little bit of 3D foam will work really nicely for adding our sentiment. So just trim a piece off and add this behind. Stick that on, and I'm just going to tidy up my desk and make a card blank for that to sit on as well. Okay, so there we have our finished card. Tomorrow is a new day, and we've got our new sort of technique that you may not have seen before, using your watercolours through your stencil. Plus we've also stamped through our stencil as well, so we're combining two sort of stenciling techniques. And then we've also overstamped some of the design as well, and then added our sentiment to finish. And I think it's a really lovely effect. And with that little bit of metallic in there as well, it's absolutely gorgeous. And I quite like that the splatter is contained within the leaf designs. I often add splatter to a lot of my projects, but I quite like the containedness of the splatter in this one as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this project, showing you how you can use your watercolours through the gorgeous Lots of Leaves stencil from the Laurel Grove Collection, and then also stamping through the stencil with some Grove Notes, a little bit of letterbox postmarks, and then also adding some overstamping over our stencil design using the sketched branches, all from the brand new Laurel Grove collection. So really hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.